Welcome to the orientation video for KidsAbility's Autism Spectrum Disorder Assessment Team. We will be walking you through what the purpose of this assessment is and what to expect during the assessment process. We will also touch on what Autism Spectrum Disorder, or ASD, is, along with some frequently asked questions so you feel prepared for the assessment. The purpose of this assessment is to rule in or out a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. Due to time constraints, this assessment is very focused and not for the purpose of any other diagnostic possibilities. Consideration of any other possible diagnosis, medication needs, or ongoing medical care will need to be addressed by your family physician or other medical professionals. If a diagnosis is provided to your child, the team will also walk you through how to access specific services related to the needs of children with autism spectrum disorder. We will discuss in detail the steps of the ASD assessment process later on in this video, but here is a basic overview so you can get a sense of what to expect. The first step involves a referral to the ASD assessment team, which must be completed by a physician and faxed to the attention of Client Information Services at KidsAbility. There is a wait associated with the team, and your first point of contact will involve an email or phone call to connect about sending the relevant documentation for you to complete and return. This documentation package includes the Vineland, a school or preschool questionnaire, a sensory checklist, and a medical questionnaire. You are also encouraged to provide copies of any reports that you feel would help the team learn more about your child. Once all of the documentation has been completed and returned, you will receive a phone call to schedule your assessment at the next available appointment time. 3 separate appointment times will be scheduled. This includes the assessment appointment, which both the child and caregivers or parents attend. This is followed by a feedback appointment and a social work appointment for parents or caregivers only. All 3 of these appointments occur at the KidsAbility Cambridge site, where the team works out of. The final social work appointment is for connecting families with community resources specifically for children with ASD, and will therefore be canceled if a diagnosis of ASD is not provided at the feedback appointment. The ASD assessment team consists of several members who work together to evaluate each child or youth. The speech-language pathologist and occupational therapist administer the ADOS, a standardized assessment, and collect relevant information to support the pediatrician, who determines the appropriateness of providing or not providing a diagnosis of ASD. The social worker on the team supports families of children who have received a diagnosis of ASD by connecting them with relevant community resources. There is a client services assistant who is also part of the team and is in charge of scheduling and collecting all relevant documentation required to provide and complete assessment. In order to prepare for the assessment, it is important that caregivers have a general understanding of what autism spectrum disorder is. Autism spectrum disorder is characterized by a delay in social communication skills accompanied by restricted or repetitive behaviors and/or sensory processing differences. Social communication delays can include difficulties in making and maintaining friendships, engaging in interactive pretend play, using verbal and nonverbal communication together to send a message to others, and participating as well as starting conversations or interactions. Restricted and repetitive behaviors can include insistence on sameness, fixations on specific topics of interest, rigid thinking, stereotyped or repetitive motor movements, and using objects or speech in a repetitive way. Sensory differences can include the interest or avoidance of different sensory experiences, such as sound, smell, touch, or taste. It is important to note that not all of these characteristics are required to meet the criteria for a diagnosis of ASD, while at the same time, only having a few characteristics does not necessarily mean that someone has ASD. It is the purpose of the ASD assessment team to tease out the strengths and challenges of each child or youth and determine whether their difficulties are best explained by a diagnosis of ASD. In the past, there were many terms such as Asperger's, pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, and autism disorder. These distinct autism diagnoses are now all merged under one umbrella diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. This diagnosis is provided for any client who meets criteria due to difficulties they are experiencing. These difficulties can range from mild to severe, which results in some children or youth with ASD requiring minimal supports, while others require significant supports in order to have success at home and in their communities. We will now break down the components of the assessment in further detail. This assessment involves the collection of information from a variety of sources. As noted in the Canadian Best Practice Guideline, a thorough history of social communication, behaviors, and sensory needs in conjunction with clinical observation allows the team to obtain an accurate picture of your child's strengths and needs in order to rule in or out a diagnosis of ASD. As previously mentioned, the first step involves a referral to the ASD assessment team, which must be completed by a physician. You can find the physician's referral form on KidsAbility's website by clicking the Services tab and locating the Autism Spectrum Disorders Assessment Team section in the list of services provided. Once the referral is completed, your physician can fax it to the attention of Client Information Services at KidsAbility. As mentioned, there is a wait associated with the assessment team, and you will be contacted by phone or email with further information about the intake process when an assessment appointment will be shortly available. Your first point of contact will involve an email or phone call and will involve sending the relevant documentation for you to complete and return. This documentation package includes the Vineland, which gives the team information about your child's functional skills at home. You will be emailed a link to complete the Vineland questionnaire online. It is important to note that there is a time limit on the online link, and it expires after 2 months of non-completion. If you have any issues with your link, please direct questions to your ASD assessment team contact. Additional documentation includes a school or preschool questionnaire, which needs to be given to someone who knows your child well and knows how they function in a group setting. The remaining mandatory documents include a sensory checklist and a medical questionnaire. You are also encouraged to provide copies of any reports that you feel would help the team learn more about their child. Please complete the documentation in a timely manner, as it must be received by the Client Services Assistant before your assessment can be scheduled. Documentation can be mailed to 500 Hallmark Drive, Waterloo, or dropped off at your closest KidsAbility site with attention for specialized services. In order to prepare for the assessment day, please do the following. Bring any reports that might be helpful to the team on assessment day. If your child has any food sensitivities or allergies, please bring your own snack to the assessment. Ensure that the caregiver attending is the best historian to speak about your child's developmental history. Bring any communication devices that your child is using at home or at school. And bring glasses or hearing supports, even if your child doesn't use them all the time. We understand that life happens, and sometimes families have a need to cancel their appointment. If this is the case, appointments will need to be rescheduled to a different month, as assessments only happen on certain days and are booked at least a month in advance. Please make sure to call if you have to cancel. You can call Cambridge Reception at extension 3000 or KidsAbility's Central Reception by pressing 0 once you've called in. Make sure to identify that you are canceling an appointment with the ASD assessment team based in Cambridge. It is important to note that a cancellation may be warranted if your child is unwell, as it is important to evaluate each child when they are at their best. On the day of the assessment, both the parents or caregivers and child are present. If your child is older, they may take part in the initial interview with the team. They will discuss the strengths and challenges they are experiencing at home, at school, and in the community. Younger children will often engage in informal play with the clinicians while a parent interview is being completed. Again, this interview is just questions specifically geared at discussing how your child is functioning in a variety of environments. This is a good time to provide any medical updates or other changes that have occurred since submitting the intake documentation. After the interview, the ADOS, or the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule, will be administered. This is the gold standard for identifying characteristics of ASD in children and youth and is a play-based assessment that typically lasts 30 to 45 minutes. Depending on the level of your child's communication skills, you may be asked to stay in the assessment room during the ADOS, or your child may go with the team to a different room while you wait in the waiting area. The full assessment typically lasts around an hour and a half. As previously mentioned, it is important to evaluate each child when they are at their best, so make sure they are well fed and well rested on the day of the assessment. A week or two following your assessment appointment, the feedback session will occur. At this appointment, the pediatrician will identify whether your child has or has not received a diagnosis of ASD. The pediatrician and the rest of the team will explain how this decision was reached and answer any questions you have at that time. It is important to remember that this appointment is for parents or caregivers only. This appointment is typically 30 to 45 minutes in length. The final session of the assessment team is the social work appointment. This appointment is only required when an ASD diagnosis has been made and is for parents or caregivers only. For families whose child has not received a diagnosis of ASD, this appointment will be canceled, and they are encouraged to connect with their referring physician and other medical team members for further support. Parents will have an opportunity to discuss any immediate questions or concerns related to the ASD diagnosis and will be provided with information on where additional supports can be found. Parents will also be provided with a package of applicable information and learn about the resources available when receiving a diagnosis of ASD. Parents will complete the initial application forms with support of the social worker. Now that we have discussed what to expect for the ASD assessment team process, we'd like to review some frequently asked questions. The first question we are often asked is, where can parents look for more information about ASD? There's a lot of misinformation about autism spectrum disorder online. We recommend www.autismspeaks.ca as a reputable site if you are interested in learning more about this diagnosis. There's even a document called the 5 Things to Do While Waiting for an Autism Evaluation. Next, we're often asked about whether the information shared during the feedback session will be shared as a document as well. A report is written with information received and observed during the assessment that pertains to aspects of social communication, sensory needs, and behaviors. This will be mailed to you and to the referring physician once completed. The final frequently asked question is, what should I do if my child receives an ASD diagnosis from another physician while I am waiting for the ASD assessment team? If this occurs, we ask you to please call and let us know so we can remove your child's name from our wait list. If you have any further questions, please contact Jennifer at 519-886-8886 at extension 1373. Thank you for taking the time to learn about the ASD assessment team at KidsAbility.